So I want to let everyone know that Ruben and I have thought about this a lot, and we're starting our own religion.
There's potential for that, absolutely. Absolutely, there's potential for it.
Welcome back to Idiots Squared. I keep saying quite possibly, but it's definitely the most open-minded podcast in the world where two complete fucking idiots are just trying to figure what all this shit's about.
This week, we're going to be discussing religion. Got to get you up there. It's something that's fascinated me my whole life. Like for you, is it something that's been of interest? Are you religious? Have you been religious? Like, is it an interesting, like something you've thought about regularly? Like, let's just sort of go over the basics.
So I actually grew up in Canada. So Canada is mainly Catholic. No, I don't think so anymore. I don't even know what would be the predominant religion now, but I mean, we have Catholic schools. We have lots of Catholic churches. Like I went to a Catholic school. So, dude, it was fucking weird, bro. Like I remember my first communion. Like it was weird. Like I remember feeling like, oh shit, like I'm gonna eat the bread. I felt like really special.
Yeah.
Right. But I always had like an issue with all of it from the get-go. Like, did you grow up Catholic?
No. So I grew up with a very diverse range of exposure to different religions and things. So on my dad's side, they were all very religious. I believe Seventh-day Adventist or Pentecostal or some, I'm not too familiar. I never spent much time understanding it. But they were all very religious. And so my dad was exposed to certain things in his life because of religion. And he sort of didn't want to put that onto us, if that makes sense. So they tried when we were younger, like they were still into that religious space, especially on my dad's side. And my mom had some exposure to religion. And so they tried, but then, they also weren't super comfortable with it, right? There were some odd things that happened that they were a little bit like, oh, that doesn't seem right kind of thing. So what they did is they sort of tried to, they tried things out. So they took us to a variety of different religions and so that we could see and experience the diversity. So I remember going to like the Tao or the Tao, other religions where it was, what was it? The Forgiving Universe and like all these other like just very interesting different religions. And so we would, as at a young age, would go around and experience and participate in these different religions, not so that we had to pick anyone, but so that we could see, maybe that was for us or maybe it wasn't for us, but we'd had that diversity of experience. That kind of makes sense. But essentially, I grew up sort of atheist, really. Like I remember being young and having many conversations with my grandmother and other people in my life at that time about religion and trying to understand those concepts. But if I'm honest, none of it really ever made any sense to me. Right? I couldn't imagine some God, being up in the clouds, this heavenly place, and him sort of all of the stuff happening that was happening, and then not doing anything about it. If that kind of makes sense, I couldn't resolve that conflict. I couldn't understand how an all-powerful being would allow all these things to happen. And so I didn't necessarily, I couldn't make the leap of faith to believe in that story. And I think it was how it was presented. Okay, but I read parts of the Bible. I was exposed to teachings from the Bible, and I thought that they were interesting, but I couldn't take that literal interpretation of it actually being a person. If that makes sense, like the way that it was taught. I didn't really grow up with any one religion. I grew up with exposure to lots of different religions, and sort of I don't know, that kind of like allowed me to see that there was commonalities between them all, right? And so I was like, well, I can see how this could be right or that could be right, or they're all trying to say the same sort of thing, just in different ways. Does that kind of make sense?
Dude, I think your parents are really smart, and with the way they raised you, that's really smart of them to be that open-minded, because they were like ahead of their time, feels like. I don't think people were as open-minded when our parents were growing up. It was
Right.
less common.
Yeah, I
So that's
agree.
cool.
Well, and it was also, but I think it's partially to do with their own experiences with religion. And so I think because they didn't necessarily have the best experience with religions, that created the space for them to be more open-minded, if that makes sense. Like they weren't getting all that they were wanting, or it wasn't what it was proposed to be. So they went looking for other ways. But yeah, I agree. They were pretty ahead of their time in that regard. So yeah, I sort of had a broad experience of different religions. And that led me to sort of, again, come to that understanding that they're all very similar. So then I was like, in my mind, I was like, you know, I doubt that like one's right and the rest are wrong, but maybe they could all be right in some. And then that kind of, set off a whole host of things. But I must admit, earlier on in my life, I was not necessarily, I'd probably say against religion, if that makes sense. I was like definitely atheist for a large part. But now, reading, learning more about what we think the universe could be and what, mathematically it looks like it might be able to describe has sort of sparked a more religious side of me, but not in the literal sense, if that makes sense. Like, not literally, but I can see why religions might have become a thing. And it was a way for humans to describe things in the only language they had at the time. So all they really knew was people and experience. So that's how they communicated these other topics, is through people and experience. It was a way of relating, these meta concepts that would have been very hard to understand back in the day because the language wasn't really there and the instruments weren't there to test it. So they just resorted to relating it to humans. That's why God is a man in a robe, that kind of thing. That I can understand. But again, learning more about the universe, I'm like, oh, okay, so God isn't a person. God is the universe. God is all that's possible. And the universe is all that's possible, right? And so when people say God, I now just substitute that with the universe.
I am on the completely same page as you. So recently, I've been learning a lot about the Bible because living in South America, people are like pretty hardcore, like religious. I wouldn't even say religious, just like by the Bible.
Yeah.
And living with my wife here in South America, she slowly, like, she started, like, really letting me know how much she's into the Bible, or as time went on, right? So it came as a bit of a surprise to me, but now I've just gotten kind of used to it. But I have been like hearing a really interesting take on the Bible recently.
Yeah.
So my wife, she's not religious. Her friends, they're not religious, right? They are people who submit to God, yes, and read the Bible and practice, or at least attempt to walk in Jesus's path as the Bible describes it, not as religious institutions describe it. Because, in fact, the Bible states that being religious and doing religious practices, like institutional ones, is actually committing sin.
Ooh.
And yeah, it's been blowing my mind lately, dude. What like they've been like telling me, because what's that?
That's very interesting. So when
Yeah,
they
it's very interesting.
as the Bible teaches, not as, what was the term you used? The religious
Like institution?
institution. Sorry, that's right. Yeah. So not as the institution says it, right? The inner, I don't know, skeptic in me thinks that, knows that the Bible as it's written was written by people. Right. So that is a version of an institution. Do you know what I mean? So I know that there are different versions of the Bible, and you have people that came into power that reformulated the teachings that were in that Bible. Can be argued that they did that to serve their own needs and their own, beliefs in that. And so I've always struggled with that as well. However, that doesn't discount the value that is in the Bible. There are sort of meta life principles or meta teachings that can be taken from it. So I see religions as a way of trying to preserve knowledge about how to how to live your life in a certain way that creates a greater space for payoffs or a more enjoyable life or leads to a fulfilled life or a better life. Yeah. And so when they say like walk in that path that the Bible says or that Jesus walked in, I think that there is truth to that. Is it an ultimate truth? Probably not, but there are truths in that. And so one of my favorite, sort of teachings or tenets from the Bible is do unto others as you would have others do unto you, right? Which is essentially treat people how you would like to be treated. And so that's an incredibly powerful sort of realization to come through. And I think, part of why the Bibles were created, I think part of it was control, but, like one big reason. But the other one was out of genuine, like trying to share these realizations or this awareness that people have come to about living your life in a certain way. It leads to, subjectively better and objectively and objectively better outcomes in life, right? And so that can intro us into like, what even is a religion? Really, like, what is it? Like, we have Christianity, we have Islam, we have Buddhism, we have Hinduism, we have many others. There's, a lot of different religions, but they're sort of the big four. What even is a religion at the core, right? Like, what do you think that a religion is?
I've always thought religion was like, yeah, doing by the book. However, the book has been manipulated. Like so many religions have different practices, which I don't know, I can't confirm if they actually say they've taken it from the book, but that they must practice in order to please God. However, they're just a pleasing man. Like everything that we do for the church and in the church's eyes, like the institution, we're doing to please a religion, please an institution. But it's actually like not like pleasing to God. Because pleasing God is not being a part of institution, right?
Can be,
So
yeah.
I find it so fascinating that like all religious people are committing sin and they're not going to get into heaven. Like I find it so hilarious that that's what the Bible says.
Yeah, maybe, like, yeah, that's definitely a possibility.
No, it does, dude. I was going over it with Miss Bunny and her pastor, and they both confirmed the same because I've asked so many questions and they've shown me verses and it's clear that it says that.
Yeah, no, I get that it says that, but some human wrote that. Do you know what I mean? Like, if
yeah, I know, but
it's the word of God. How did God write it? Okay, and in our existence, it can only come through us. Like it was a person that ended up writing that. But I get trust me, I get the meta point. It's just very hard to speak in depth. Okay. You know what I mean? Like,
I know, but if we're like going by the Bible, right? Because it's the only thing that we have to go off of. But I agree with you. I agree with you. So the argument is, the argument is that someone was inspired by God to write it. So it was through a human. And when you argue logic, because I've argued logic with my wife, I've argued it with her pastor, they both what they say is that, dude, like having faith is not logical because there's lots of things in the universe that you can't explain.
Yep.
So you can't come to logic on everything. So this is just another thing that you just have to have faith in. Yeah. So it's hard to argue that point, even though like it doesn't sound like it's not 100% logical, right?
Absolutely. So, but we can get into what we can say, or sort of, with things we know now. What can we say with more certainty, or with higher probabilities, that kind of stuff. So, essentially, what makes a religion is just a set of shared beliefs. All right. That's all it is. A set of shared beliefs. It's a way of organizing people around a belief structure or a set of beliefs. Okay. So Islam have their set of beliefs. Christianity has their set of beliefs. Hinduism have their set of beliefs, and it's a mechanism of organizing people through their beliefs, right? And so if you think about it, you've got all these people running around with no sort of, like probabilistically, so probably some people have similar beliefs to other people and they might be able to get together and, work or whatever. But religion is a way of providing this sort of order, this defined set of beliefs that can, coerce or bring people together into a community that can then collaborate and achieve something greater than the sum of the parts, right? And so that's why religions have been very powerful, is because they actually help to organize people, get them to work towards common goals that they can all agree are common goals because they share the same beliefs. Yeah. Now, on top of that, you can put in rituals and practices and that kind of stuff, but just at the core, it's just that set of shared beliefs. And why would that be valuable to people? Well, I can easily think if I was, existing 2,000 or 3,000 years ago, without, the technology and the tools that we have today, it would be really hard to come to terms with what any of this is. It's still hard in this day and age with all the technology and knowledge that we have. It's still really difficult. And so religion was kind of it's kind of like an operating system. That shared beliefs is like an operating system that you can adopt. And if you just believe that and you act in this way, you can get rid of all this concern, all this unnecessary worry about the universe and fear and all this other stuff can go away because you just trust in God. And if you behave this way, these people tell you that you are going to go to heaven, right? 2,000 years ago, how would you come to terms with what death is, right? Or where you go or anything. And so that would be a huge concern, I can imagine, for a lot of people possibly. What's death? What happens after you die? And so you imagine you get someone come along and says, oh, no, if you act well in this life, or if you, follow these behaviors or these beliefs in this life, and you conduct yourself in this certain way, when you die here, you go to this magic place where everything is the best that it could be. Right? That's a gangster sales pitch. Try and say no to that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
With the amount of uncertainty back in the day and the lack of sort of knowledge in certain areas, that would be a huge hack. And that's really what it is. Religions are like an operating system that allow a whole bunch of different people to get together and work together, but they also stop you from wasting or spending computation on all this unnecessary or possibly necessary worry. But it's like a giant performance hack to not have to worry about all this uncertainty. It's like an antidote to chaos, yeah, in some sense, right? Because there's all this uncertainty that it's just too much for any one person to compute and understand. And so just by having this belief system, like putting blinders on, it means you don't have to worry about all that unnecessary stuff. That kind of resonate or make any sense?
100%. That's definitely a huge, huge benefit. I was thinking as you were talking about the Buddhist religion, actually. For some reason, I feel like that's one of, I don't know, it seems to be just look at the cultures that's developed. Look at Thailand and Laos. What other country is Buddhist over there? Is Myanmar?
Tibetans and all sorts of different people. There's lots of Buddhists around the world, but yes, as countries, I think they're the sort of main big ones. I'm not super familiar with them.
It just seems like Buddhist countries are just more calm. There's less issues, or maybe just different kinds of issues. But also, I find that there isn't. What's that?
Definitely different issues. They're definitely more calm. But the downside of being calm is if you have another group of people who are sort of aggressive, and you're calm, and they develop the ability to project power, they could easily take over you, if that makes sense. Right? So there's all these trade-offs, right? You can be a perfect no harm, no violence, whatever. But if you have somebody come along that believes in violence and is willing to use it, well, you're probably not going to fare very well against that person. So there's benefits and trade-offs with all of this stuff, which it's really interesting to see.
That's a great point, actually, Roos. Yeah, you're right. You're right. I just found it so interesting that in Thailand you can leave your cell phone like on the table in the restaurant, and in 4 hours it'll still be there. Like it's crazy. Like legit, like Thailand is like that. Maybe not parts of Bangkok, but like man, one time I left my motorbike with the keys in it, like for 12 hours. For 12 hours, dude. And it was a nice and I rented it. It was a nice bike.
On purpose
Yeah.
or accidentally?
No, dude, it was accidental, man. I came back and the keys were there, and I was like, "Yo, thank God I'm in Thailand, dude.
Ah,
Like, thank God I'm in Thailand." Yeah,
isn't
that was actually what's that?
I was going to say, isn't that such an interesting saying? Thank God,
Yeah,
right?
that
Like,
is a really interesting saying. Yeah,
in some
but
cases, I get it, but in reality, like sometimes, why thank God when you could thank yourself?
yo, I'm with you. I'm with you, guy.
It's there's cases where anyway, we'll get into we'll dig into all of this, okay? So, um, I put a doc together for the pod, right? I did a little bit of
Yeah,
like, what is religion? I used ChatGPT for some of it, and it's hilariously wrong
fuck yeah.
in aspects, right? So take everything that's sort of presented here with a grain of salt. The doc will be available in a link in the description, so you can all read over it. Feel free to roast us and criticize and point out all the errors in it because we can get better together. Okay. So essentially,
100%.
I'll just read this little intro thing. So I was trying to like come up with like what do all religions sort of share? Like and again, it came out to that beliefs, right? So this is so I asked it, what makes a religion a religion? Okay, so it says there is no one answer to this question because different people have different ideas about what constitutes a religion. However, most people agree that a religion is a set of beliefs, practices, and rituals that are associated with the worship of a higher power or powers. These beliefs, practices, and rituals are often centered around the idea of finding spiritual enlightenment or understanding the meaning of life. Religion often involves a sense of community and shared values among its followers, and it may include the use of religious texts, symbols, and ceremonies. Some common characteristics of religion include a belief in a supreme being or beings, the worship of these beings, and the pursuit of spiritual enlightenment. Right? So that's a very like typical sort of answer. I call bullshit on like I think that that's what historically we've done, and I think that people think that that's true, but I don't think that that is true. Like I don't think that's meta true, right? I think they're artifacts of our limited ability to explain these incredibly abstract concepts. Yeah. So I think when we say, these spiritual beings, or what was the other one? Understanding often, yeah, worshiping the higher powers and thinking that they're these beings that look out over us. I think that was a simplistic way, very human-centric way of explaining concepts that we didn't have the capacity or the ability to fully articulate, and might not ever have the ability to fully articulate. So I think that they're artifacts. So, but all the religions share this, right, about this higher power, and I don't think that's a bad thing. Okay. Okay. So there's interesting statistics on this, right? It says that about 31% of the world's population identify as Christian. That's the largest. Islam is the second largest, with about 24% of the world's population identifying as Muslim. And Hinduism is the third largest, with about 15%. And I think
I met some.
Okay.
I met some Islam guys, actually, Islamic guys.
Okay.
I was in Jakarta, and there was this mosque there. Like I think it's the biggest mosque, or the second biggest mosque in the world, maybe, or something crazy. I don't remember.
They're huge
in Jakarta. Yeah, and I was on my way there, and I met these two Islamic guys, and they just wanted to like tag along with me and like explain to me what Islam is. Well, I guess I tagged along with them because like they went to pray and shit, and I spent the day with them, and they were telling me a whole bunch of like interesting things. One thing that they told me was that the reason why women sit or they pray, sorry, in the front behind the men. I almost said front rows. The reason why the women pray behind the men is so the men don't look up I mean, it's one of the reasons, right? It's to like protect them, but part of protecting them is so
What you
men
see?
don't look up and check them out. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
what these guys were telling me. So when people think like, oh, like why are women behind them? It's to protect them
yeah.
from that.
So,
It's just one reason, but I thought that was interesting.
well, but it shows you, right? So I don't. A common thing that I observe is people go, "This is the truth. This is exactly that." Is Islamic people do that because they're sexist or they believe that women are less than men, right? And I can
Yeah.
understand how someone might think that, okay? But I can also understand that the rationale that those gentlemen provided you could also be it. So they might be doing it from a caring place. It's how you want to see it. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, if you
Absolutely.
choose to look at it a certain way, you could put it down to being sexist. If you choose to look at it in a way where it's like, yeah, we can't trust men, right? They're pervs. So like the chicks just go behind because instead of having to worry about all the dudes perving and all the chicks, we can just solve it like this. Yeah. But from an outsider, if you want to perceive it as a bad thing, you're just like, they're so sexist, right? Like
Yeah.
the chicks are
Yeah.
always behind. I believe that's also another. I've heard and I've read that it's partly behind the burqa as well. Is part of it. It's sold as the reason that the women are required to cover up is because men can't be trusted, right? Like they cannot be trusted seeing a pretty woman. They're just like I can imagine this back in the day. Like rape would have been ridiculous back in the day. Like you could essentially get away with almost anything once villages got beyond like 150 to 200 people. There's just so many people to hide in, and then it's like his word versus my word, or her word versus my word, that kind of thing. And just the amount of shit that could have happened would be ridiculous. So, I can understand why throughout evolution it might have been advantageous, sort of to cover up a bit to stop that. A funny thing is, in Western society at the moment, there's like a complete opposite of that happening. The inverse is like chicks and dudes are both trying to wear like the least amount of clothes possible, and like getting the shits when people perv on them. It's
Yeah.
like don't
Absolutely.
don't wear clothes that are incredibly revealing and sexualizing if you don't want people to look at you. Like, don't stand out if you don't want people to look like to get pay attention to you. You know what I mean? Like there's a definite way to get attention, and wearing very few clothes appeals to our interests, like our subconscious, our evolutionary desire to replicate. you know?
Dude, I know it's so funny. And there's like lots of girls online posting videos, trash talking guys that check them out in the gym. And the video's always the same. They're wearing like the sexiest clothes,
The
and
booty
then
shorts.
they position themselves in front of like guys, like right in the center, good lighting, like she does everything perfect, the perfect like angle, and then you see like the guy look over for like a split second and turn back to his buddy, and she's like, "Hey, you checking me out?" You know what I mean? Like giving them shit about it.
Yeah.
So funny.
So I have a thing about that, right? So we're talking about religion. We were just talking about like heaven before, like the place you go to. So that what you just described is in one of my definitions of hell. That's what hell is, right? Imagine being that person. So let's say like that girl, or even a guy that does this, right? That to me is a definition of hell, right? So you're dressing up in this way, you're wanting to look sexy or whatever, and then when you get the attention, it's the worst thing. It's a negative thing. You get the shits when they look at you, right? Well, then why are you presenting yourself in such a way? Does that kind of make sense? Like they live in a dichotomy where they want this thing, but then when they get it, it's a negative thing. So that honestly, when people describe hell, that's sort of been my new interpretation is hell is hell is this place where you have a divergence, and heaven is this place where you have alignment, where your wants and your needs are the same thing. And hell is when your wants and your needs are two different things and they diverge. They pull apart from each other. That's a hell, in my opinion.
Wow, damn, Rubes, well
Yeah,
said.
think about that, right?
That
Like
was impactful. That was impactful. Well said, dude.
there's
Man,
many other
I,
instances of that. There's so many. Like you can use that analogy throughout this pod. But unless you had anything you want to riff off on that. Oh, sorry. The last thing I want to say about you mentioned Islamic people. Some of my best friends are Muslim, uh, and they are like uh, just beautiful people. Beautiful religion when it's not radicalized, right? When there's something so I don't know, so interesting about being able to give up, like 5 parts of your day just to pray. Like they have, it's a very different sort of way of life, and I really appreciate my time with my Islamic or Muslim friends when I spend time. I think it's a beautiful thing, but you can also see how it gets tainted and used for bad, so to speak, or radicalized.
I have the same experience with Muslims
Yeah,
and Islamic folks. Yeah,
yeah.
both very beautiful. Like they're both religions are very beautiful when they're yeah. When I mean, like what you said, when they're not radicalized.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And quite deep thinking. So we'll go through the doc's got a whole bunch of stuff about like the main teaching of Islam and Christianity, Hinduism, all that kind of stuff. But like there's so much of this overlap, right? But the one thing that really was interesting to me is Hinduism and Buddhism all have this sort of cyclical concept, right? Like karma and all these different things about what goes around comes around, and reincarnation and all of that. And I think when I was reading through it, the reincarnation thing really stuck with me, right? So they believe in like, you'll come back as something different. And when I was younger, I was like, what? Like that doesn't seem to make sense with me. And then starting to learn physics and mathematics and things like that, it kind of dawned just on me. It was like reincarnation is 100% true, just not in the way we typically think about it, right? So there are, so you're made up, you're you, right? You're a singular being, right? That's a pretty, you identify as Polska, okay?
Yeah.
What makes you up, right? So you're made up of a bunch of organs, yeah? So you got your brain, your skin, your liver, your kidneys. What are those organs made up of?
Right. I see your point.
Well, we'll just indulge me. Let's walk down the path, all right? So what are your
All right. Well,
organs made up of?
well, what a bunch of different molecules and different
So
atoms and
cells
different
are made up of
cells and
molecules. Yeah. So we
yeah,
get down to atoms, right? So there is
yeah.
just an unimaginably large amount of atoms that you're made up of. Okay. What's anything else on the planet made up of at that base level?
The same thing.
Atoms as well, right? So at any point in time, there's a crazy ass statistic on this. But essentially, we have an atom from everything that's ever existed within it. Like we all share an atom in some way, shape, or form, right? So everything that has been like life on this planet is again in us in some instance, right? When you breathe air, you're breathing air that might have come out of Tutankhamun's lung, or you've got a particle in you from that time, right? Like we're all made out of the same stuff from this one planet, and it's all getting recycled all the time. Yeah? That's reincarnation, right? There's a part of you that once was a part of a dinosaur, right? There's a little bit of T-Rex. There's a little bit of Velociraptor in you right now. There's a little bit of Genghis Khan in you right now. Like it is just insane. But they took that incredibly complex, abstract, weird-ass thing. They didn't know about atoms back in the day, right? A couple of thousand years ago. They didn't know about these tiny little particles, the way that we know about them today. And so the only way they could describe it was this incredibly sort of condensed down version of it, right? Or this very sort of like simplistic way of looking at it, because they didn't necessarily have the language or the tools to be able to describe it in more detail. And so that just became reincarnation. But like when you think about it like that, does it make sense what reincarnation is? Like parts of you, when you die, will break down and go into other things. Like a worm will eat some of you, or a bug will eat some of you. It'll then shit you back out, and then that gets used by something else, and it might go into another organism and become, part of a muscle cell or part of a brain cell or a neuron or something.
Yeah, the way that the church has basically explained that portion is a bit. Well, they say that when your soul dies, it's born in another life form, right? Some religions say animals, or it's with animals, or it can be with anything, or is it animals?
No, you can be reincarnated into anything. I think is the thing in Hinduism or Buddhism.
So your soul moves on, right, into something new.
Yeah.
So that's basically a very good analogy for your atoms moving on and going into something new.
Yes, but so that's where I think it gets misinterpreted is when they say your soul goes into something new. So what I'm trying to get at is when we exist, I exist as I am now, right? You exist as you are in this instantiation. You're in this physiological format. You're in this set of entanglement that makes up Polska, that makes up me as Ruben, right? My soul is sort of dependent on that, right? That's tied to this entanglement that is me. Right, I'm a subset of the universe. I'm a specific, entanglement graph, so to speak, or hypergraph, and so are you. And so when that hypergraph breaks down and goes back into its individual components, right, then so does that instantiation of the soul. So does that instantiation of that version of me. So when I become something else, it's not that I'm that other thing. It's that things that used to make me up are now contributing to making something else up. So I think it's very special that we have this instantiation we have, and I don't think that gets transported into if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I like that. All right, Guy, what's next on the document?
Okay, so with the religions. So they got, there's the teaching of the Jesus and all these other things. But what I thought was really interesting was the fact that they all share, it's all just a set of shared beliefs, right? And that with that, so much can be achieved because it's a way of bringing people together around shared and common goals that they can all agree on because they share the same beliefs. And so I can see why it's been so pervasive throughout time, right? Because it's a way of taking chaos and ordering it, bringing it together, aligning, working towards a common goal, working towards a common mission. And so it changed my perception of religions thinking through it this way. I thought, wow, they're incredible tools for change, right? For achievement. But because of their, power for good, they also have the power to be manipulated. And I think that, largely religions, have done quite good, but they've also been hijacked by people and by, sort of, what's the term to describe it? Sort of people who are power hungry, or groups of people who are power hungry. Okay. And so I can see how they've been radicalized. That's probably the easiest way, radicalized, but then also used for the potential upside that they have. And
it's great business.
Okay, exactly. So when I was thinking through all of that, I was like, holy shit, right? Imagine if, thousands of years ago, people were really thinking through these things and they sort of came to have these realizations. And their way of sort of communicating it to other people who might not have been as educated or had the ability to read was through stories. Okay. And then along that path, sorry about that, Guy, that was my bad. Along that path, right, a group of people realized that life is heaven, right? It's existence that is heaven, okay? So somebody keeps trying to call me. It is existence that is heaven, right? And then they realize, hold up, there's a big thing that everyone worries about, which is death. So if we sell them a false narrative, which is if you do what we say to do in this life, you can then go to heaven. Okay. And heaven is this place where everything is fine and dandy. It's all the things you'd ever want, right? No one can sort of disagree with them because you can't go to heaven and then come back. Okay. It's a one-way trip. So they can't call bullshit on it. And then that group of people realize that, hold up, if we sell these people this sort of narrative, we can get them to build our version of heaven on earth. And I think that is where we sort of took a wrong step. I think that's where these things started to get overtaken. I think they started with this incredible desire to become more than we were, to be able to grow and achieve together. And then I think along the way, certain groups of people realized that they could take advantage of that because of the power in it. They could then take advantage of it and steer it in the direction that they wanted to go in for their own sort of selfish needs. Does that kind of make sense?
I'm curious if the first original thought of creating the institution was like just out of their good of heart, like trying to do a difference in the world in a good way. And it's likely that sort of business mindset evolved from that. But it's possible that the thought of it, the first people who initiated it were trying to do it for the better. Like you said, give people answers and hope instead of controlling people.
Well, so there's a good saying I'm pretty sure it's from the Bible. It's the road to hell is paved with good intentions. You know,
that's a good line, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, I would argue that that's how religion started, from something good.
Well,
it led.
That's what I mean. Like, it starts out with this amazing intentions, and then because of the power of it, if you then realize that you can use this structure that persists over time, you can then use it for your own means. You can use that structure to project what you really want. That's where the danger comes in. But that danger is inherent with all of these things. And it comes down to, like, this is where it comes down to, access to
groupthink, like people in groups.
Well, that too, but also access to information. So, not everyone has always been able to read. You got to, like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's people who have had access, and this exists throughout life and society today. There are information asymmetries, so this information might have been privy to certain groups of people, and they could be using it for good, and it grows and grows, and it builds up this big structure of power. But then all it takes is for somebody to come in and realize that there's all this power in this structure, and then sort of use it for their own means and deliberately spread information to get that. Find it?
Yeah.
Make sense?
Yeah, guy. You're saying that all priests are going to hell. Well, there you go, guy.
Yeah, look. Okay, let's talk about it. All right, what is hell? All right, so I don't know about you, but I'll explain when I was younger and for a good part of my life, this is what when I thought about it in my head, thought of. Right, heaven is this place up in the clouds, right, where everyone you've ever known and loved they're all there, and you're having the greatest time. And I never really thought much past that, okay, for a good part of my life. And hell, right, was always like this horrible hot place with all this fire, and there was a devil there, and it was just like the worst place to be. Yeah? Is that sort of similar to yours?
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought. Like 100%, dude. I actually tried to avoid thinking about, no, there's no hell, dude. There's no way. There's no way. There's only heaven. Only heaven exists. And then I'm like, well, like, what is heaven? Like, I quickly came to those conclusions when I was growing up. I don't know why. I remember when I was like in grade 3, I was telling people I didn't believe in God. And then they were asking me why, and I was like, I don't remember what I was saying, but I was basically just saying, like, it just sounds like bullshit. It just things just don't add up for me. And people were like, oh, that's weird, but like people didn't have a problem with it because you're in grade 3, like nobody's like giving
Yeah,
you a hard time about like random shit. Everyone's just concerned about having fun. You know what I mean?
yeah. There's not much pushback because of the lack of
Yeah.
reasoning at that age.
Yeah. What, 8 years old in grade three, right?
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah. That sounds about right to me.
Anyways. Yeah.
So, um, like I struggle to pass that, given what I think I understand now, and what I've learned. I struggle to believe that that is exactly what happens, right? Um, and so I think that they were really trying to communicate, and I've seen this. I've had people die in my life, and I've seen the last stages of death, and seen different people on their deathbed at different, across my life. Okay, and there was something that I observed which I thought was interesting, which is if you live your life in a certain way, right? Death isn't something that you run away from or hide from, something you embrace. Right? But in order to embrace it, you've got to live a life that's fulfilled. You've got to have purpose and meaning, and you've got to sort of have pushed as best you could towards achieving that purpose and meaning, like living a fulfilled life. All right. And so when it comes time to die, there isn't anything that you're missing out on, that you're regretting not having done. All right. So I can imagine that that is a very heavenly experience. Yeah. That transition would be beautiful, in my opinion. Now, I can also imagine the inverse of that, which is if you have not lived a life that was true to you, you have not followed your purpose and meaning or found your purpose and meaning, and you live with many regrets, or you've done things that you're not proud of, or you've treated people or yourself in ways that you hate or you regret, or all of that other stuff. I can imagine that being quite a hellish experience. I can imagine that being very difficult. All right. Um, and so, thinking through this when I was slightly younger, um, it led me to read a book called The Tibetan Art of Living and Dying. And this was a very interesting book because it presented a different way of thinking about things that I'd never really thought of. Right? My grandmother put me onto this book, by the way. So I would have these conversations with my grandmother. Um, Now, in that book, what was very different is I grew up in a Western society, right? And death wasn't something that was talked about very often. It was this sort of taboo subject that no one really spoke about, but everyone was afraid of. Yeah. And when I started reading this book, The Tibetan Art of Living and Dying, death was like the first thing that they start to deal with, right? They sort of plan for their death from day one. And then that way they're not afraid of it. They fully embrace the reality of it. They take it as like the only constant, or the only guarantee we have in life is death. And then they sort of structure their lives around that. Like, if I'm like, knowing that I'm going to die, what is it and how is it that I want to live my life? And I was like, whoa, that is just mind blowing. Like they would, if somebody's, an older person in the community, they always, pack their stuff up the night before, case the next day they died, because they didn't want to burden the rest of the community with having to do that for them. Right? Like all this crazy stuff, but they live their life in a way knowing and in fully embracing that they are going to die. And so they live their life trying, or, pursuing the things that they wanted to do and needed to do in their lives, so that they were ready. If the time ever came, they would not go with regret. They would not go not knowing what could have been. They'd explored that possibility space. Does that
When are we going to Tibet, Guy?
Well, I'm down 100%. 100%
Yeah,
down.
dude. I want to go experience that with those guys.
Well, this is the beauty. So yes, we can definitely go and experience it with them, but just simply thinking about your life in that way allows you to have that. Like it's a beautiful thing. Like, don't be afraid of that death. So anyway, it opened my eyes to a different way of thinking about something, and I was like, that seems to me a better way to think about this. Right? So it's been ever since reading that and thinking about these things, it's always been foreign to me how much sort of death is avoided. It's this taboo subject in Western culture.
Guy, would you be down to climb Mount Everest in Tibet?
100.
Yeah.
100.
What's like the death rate What's the percentage of people that go and die in Mount Everest? I remember it being higher than I thought it was.
I don't know, but I also don't
Yeah.
care because
No, I know.
part of
I'm
that
just bringing it up for like
is,
shit's sake.
is
What's that?
something that I would, if I really want to do that, I have to embrace the fact that that is a possible consequence.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I would be happy because at least I died doing something that I was wanting to do, and I chose to do. You know what I mean?
yeah. Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. I think there's other mountains that are much dangerous though, like K2. I think I don't remember which ones exactly, but there's certain mountains that have. I believe it was upwards of like a 30% death rate.
Yeah, I can
No,
imagine that. But I can
there
also
was some kind of Rogan that mentioned something like that. I can't remember what the fuck the stat was now, but it was a surprisingly high percentage of people were dying on this mountain. Not K2, not Mount Everest. I don't remember what it was, but yeah.
yeah, I can imagine it. A lot of people, it's very funny because you know, it it's easy to underestimate how ridiculously harsh nature is when you're so abstracted away from the reality of nature, right? Like modernity has abstracted us a long way away from the harshness of reality. Our ancestors really, really understood how harsh reality is, how cruel of a beast Mother Nature can be, both the most giving thing that there is and the most destructive thing that there is. You know what I mean? There's a duality.
Yeah.
I just got to pause for a
Sorry,
wee
guy.
1 sec.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, I have something for you when you come back.
Get your stats. Be back.
Yo. All right, guy. So sorry to go off on this tangent here, but
Go for it.
um, the deadliest mountain in the world is in Nepal, Annapurna. Annapurna? I don't know how you say that. In the last 158 attempts, 58 people have died.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a high
Number two, guess what number two is?
K2.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
K2. A total of 66 people have died from 284 attempts.
Oh, wow. That's
Yeah,
hardly
so
any.
those are pretty serious.
Yeah, no, I
What's
agree.
that?
It's just, well, I said that's hardly any attempts really when you think about it. Like out of, there's 8 billion people on the planet now, and there's only 278. There's been more people to exist than 8 billion throughout human history. But that's just recorded attempts. Anyway.
Guess where Everest is on that list? It's a top 10 list, by the way. And
Oh,
it's from this 9 News in Australia. So I don't know how legit it is, but
I'd say
anyways.
number 7.
It's number 9.
Oh, wow.
It's probably because it's the most organized one, because it's the most famous one, probably, that most people do. So they probably have put in like just more money into it, making sure, the ladders are good and everything else.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree.
And just sheer people. Yeah.
Um, okay, so we were back. We were talking about on,
Religion.
yeah, definitely religion. Um,
By the way, I believe in God now, right? Not the one from like the Bible, but like I do believe in like my own God. But I'm not saying the one from the Bible is wrong, by the way. Like, if it's legit, it's legit, but I just don't see it the way it's portrayed. You know what I mean?
yeah. So okay, so the way I see it now, right? The way that and again, I hold my beliefs loosely. I'm willing to update based off new information, but given the things that I've learned over my life, and especially these last few years, getting into like fundamental physics and things like that, I believe the universe and God are the same thing. Like they're really referencing the same thing. And I think the universe is the Ruliad, right? Stephen Wolfram coined this term, the Ruliad, and it's the entangled limit of all possible formal systems. So anything that can be is that is the Ruliad, and I think that's what historically we've actually meant when we said God. I think that was the only way they could describe it was through that personification. And now that we have different technologies and different languages and mathematical structures and things like that, we can now sort of say it in more encompassing terms, or more sort of potentially accurate terms, right? So I think that that's what God really is. And thinking about it like that has allowed me to become religious in a sense, because I realized that they're just sets of beliefs. And so then it's sifting through and finding, okay, what are the most valuable beliefs that a person could have? Right. So you introed this pod with, we're going to start a religion, right? I think that there really is a space to create a new religion. Okay. Taking all that we've known from the previous religions and all that we can now know from physics and extracting what beliefs can we, like, what are the most useful or valuable beliefs to a person, to a collective of people, to a society, to groups, right? That would allow them to explore what's possible in the universe, right? And there's certain spaces of possibility that we'd really want to explore, and certain spaces of possibilities that we'd want to try and, avoid. Like, we don't really want to explore all that's possible in human suffering. That to me seems silly. So, don't necessarily have the beliefs that create that space. Let's adopt the beliefs that create the space for all that's possible in let's say, a positive direction. Yeah, you can't avoid all the negatives, but you can definitely choose to have beliefs that lead to more upside than downside, so to speak. Yeah. So I asked ChatGPT, and with a lot of prompts, I ended up getting some pretty decent responses from it. So it was like, at a high level, what do all religions have in common? Not aside from the beliefs, okay? So it goes, at a high level, all religions can be seen as having certain things in common, such as the following: a belief in a higher power or ultimate reality. Okay, all religions involve a belief in some form of higher power or ultimate reality, such as God, the universe, or a supreme being. This belief provides a foundation for the religious beliefs and practices of the religion. Right, so that's kind of like the first belief you have to have, and then it opens the door for these other. Then it says a set of teachings and principles. All religions have a set of teachings or principles that provide guidance for how followers of the religion should live their lives. Right? So it's not just like, you should believe this. It's like, believe this, and then here are the actions that you can do. Like we did that goals and habits pod. It's like, the belief is that sort of destination, and then the teachings and principles are the things you do every day to get to that destination. So yeah, that's how they should live their lives. These teachings often include moral guidelines, spiritual practices, and beliefs about the nature of reality and the ultimate goal of human existence. Okay, that's a good one. I'm going to put a pin in that. The ultimate goal of human existence. I think I have a potential answer for that. A community of followers. All religions involve a community of followers who share the beliefs and practices of the religion. These communities provide support, fellowship, and a sense of belonging to members. And then the last one it says is a system of leadership and governance. All religions have some form of leadership and governance to provide direction and guidance for the community of followers. This may include a hierarchy of leaders, rules, and regulations, and a system for making decisions and resolving conflicts. Right? And then overall, while there are many differences among different religions, they all have certain things in common, such as the belief in higher power, a set of teachings or principles, a community of followers, and a system of leadership and governance. Right? And so then I was like, okay, that's interesting. So now I said, steel man some cases for why religions have been so popular and successful. So it comes back and goes, religions have been popular and successful for a variety of reasons. Some potential reasons for this include the following: meeting basic human needs. Religions provide answers to fundamental questions of the meaning of life, nature of reality, and our place in the world. These answers can provide comfort and guidance in times of uncertainty and can help individuals to find meaning and purpose in their lives. Right? And so that was that comment I made before about it's an antidote to chaos. Right?
Interesting. Ruben, I have a question for you. After using Chat GPT for so long, is Chat, like, how long does it store information that you put into it for? Or you can use like a refresh each time you use it?
Yeah, it's pretty much refresh each time you use it. It keeps context within the conversation you're working with it in, that specific chat. and you can prompt it to sort of go back to specific points. But it doesn't have infinite context. It only sort of it has a very limited context, just like humans do.
For some, it just idea popped in my head. Imagine like that it always stored something, and it was just like learning you, and then giving answers that are like biased to your satisfaction.
So that will
Because
be
that's a very satisfying answer. What's that?
that's definitely going to be possible more so in the future.
Yeah,
And there's other ways you can do
that's
it with
curious,
fine
right?
tuning and feeding it certain data. But the key point to understand is it all, in order to say anything, you have to have a bias. Okay. The danger with bias is that you're not aware of your bias. That's the biggest danger, right? Everyone gets worried about, oh, that's biased or this. Like, in order to say anything, you have to have a bias. You have to have a reference frame. You have to be picking a way to see it. Because ultimately, what is life? What is the universe? It's an infinity of possibility. Okay? That's what the universe is. And so back up there, I said I wanted to put a pin in a point, right? Which was the ultimate, like, these beliefs about the nature of reality and the ultimate goal of human existence. Like, that's what religions sort of solve. That's what they aim to do, right? So what is the ultimate goal of human existence? What is life about to you, Guy? What is the meaning of life?
The meaning of life to me,
It's a tough question, don't get me wrong. And if you don't have a
it's just
answer, it's fine.
no. I do. It's just not a short answer. I'm just trying to be concise.
Yeah.
No, just I would just say living to the fullest. Like, don't have too many regretful moments in your life. Don't have too many regretful days. Like, obviously, everyone's gonna have like things that they regret, but it's one thing to regret something, but it's not. But it's another thing to like dwell on it. But I think just trying to live your best life and help as many people as you can, and be the example you want to see in the world. That's essentially what I think.
I like that. So
Yeah.
for me, the way I would communicate this now is, given that all that exists is all that can exist, okay, and we're just a particular instantiation of that, then the meaning of life is for us to explore as much of what's possible as we can. Right? So, like, it's not about, it's not about any of the trivial things that we've sort of historically put it down to. It really is like, the one thing we can say about life is that it's for us to explore all that's possible, to experience those things, and to continue the ability for others to experience those things.
Yeah, dude. Having like a blaze moment, you know what I mean? I think maybe I blazed too much before the pod. I found like 3 puffs was like a good level, right? But like
Till we talk.
today I only had like one big one. What's that?
Yeah, I said three's normally good until you start talking about religion, the meaning of life, death, hell, reincarnation, da da da. Like, yeah, this is a deep topic.
Yeah, no, I'm kind of like blown away. Like this has become one of my favorite topics actually recently, just because like I become passionate about it just because of like what my wife has been explaining to me from the Bible. It's just really interesting to grow up as a Catholic, live your life up until I was like, when did I decide? Well, I was in a Catholic high school, right? So until I was 18, right? I was under the Catholic influence in some sense. And it's just interesting to figure out like, wow, like all the schools I went to, all those churches I went to, like it's all like a one big institution. Like who knows like how much like where would the Catholic Church and like the Christian Church, like where do they stand as in terms of richest institutions? Like are
Oh,
they
they've amassed a huge amount of power and influence and money.
yeah.
That's what I'm trying to get across is like, these things started out quite likely with the best of intentions. And then because they were so powerful, well, then if you hijack it, you can use all that power for whatever you want. And unfortunately, it, in my opinion, has not been used for the greater good that it could have been used for, right? It's been largely manipulated and gamed. And the reason they've been able to do that is because they provide, right, by having these beliefs, by having these rituals and practices and structure and this leadership, all of this different stuff. It's this immense power structure that they can take advantage of, that then they can use to, people can selfishly or ignorantly use to their own means. And I think that if we start to then instead think of religions as this set of shared beliefs, and that our goal, one of our goals of being a human, is to find what beliefs lead to the most unbounded opportunity or potential to explore reality. And then they're the beliefs that we should start adopting, or at least trying, and again, holding them loosely, not holding them tightly. Like a lot of the Bible is like, you have to believe this specific thing, right? Whereas I think a lot of beliefs should actually be self-evident. Like once you start, trying that belief on, it should become self-evident to you why you would want to continue doing it. I don't think you should have to be forced, so to speak, right? But I just want to hit this topic of like, because the universe is all that's possible, right? It's just an immense amount of data or information. And unless you have a certain structure to be able to perceive that, right, it's just like chaos everywhere. How can you make sense of this crazy event that happened, or like someone dies that you loved, and like how do you pass that? How do you make sense of any of that? And that's where it's this structures, right? It's this beliefs allow you to start to order chaos in a certain way, and it can either be very useful or it isn't useful. Okay, so we want to try and get that usefulness. What it is, it's this antidote to chaos. It's by having these beliefs, by having this structure that we can take from all this human experience. We can take the meta lessons from that, and we can take those beliefs and adopt them within ourselves. Allows us to order and make sense of that chaos in some way. So let's try and find the ways that lead to the unbound continuation of that instead of very limited ways. That kind of makes sense. It's a meta sort of topic.
No, it does. It does. And as you were saying that, I was trying to think of what could, I want to ask you, sorry, what would heaven be like? What do you think?
Well, so
if you were trying to concept like what it is with logic, as much logic as you can to try and create a concept of what could heaven be.
So I think that heaven is when you are back at that base level of the universe. It's you're part of the collective whole of the universe in that pure sense. And it's only when we're entangled in all this other, like it's all the particles together that make up me, that I get to see the universe in this way. But when that untangles and I go back to just being the quantum waves or, like the quantum perturbations, that's what I think that's that heaven. There is no real experience there. So there can be no suffering. There can be, it can't be anything else because you are just that whole thing. And I think it might be, it might be incredibly satisfying to be that whole thing. Like, you're not necessarily going to be able to perceive yourself as that whole, the whole thing because you're just existing. But we exist in this entangled form that we are, which is why we see the things we see in the universe. And when that untangles, you just go, you go back into just being the whole. Like, it's infinite possibility. When you go back to that base level, you're all that's possible again. That's what I think heaven is. Yeah, and I think
your parents.
But I think the heaven and the hell reference was to do with the last moments of your life. Like if you haven't lived a life full to yourself, then your last moments will be horrible. They'll be hellish because you got to go through all the things you didn't do, or all the things you wish you did differently, or all this. That's a horrible experience to have right before you leave. And I think that's where we got the hell idea from. And then the people that did live their lives in these certain ways and were true to themselves in that regard and were, very content to die, and they know that their time has come, and they're thankful for the time that they've had because they've made the most of it. That would have been heavenly. But yes, pleased with your question.
Out of all the religions your family exposed you to, which one would you say was the most interesting?
The teachings of the Tao or the Tao, I can't remember, but I was very fascinated by that. This is the sort of you lift your plate before every meal to the universe. It was a very universe centric. And
Mhm.
then Buddhism was I was exposed to, and that was very interesting as well. And Hinduism, I think like those ones sort of resonated with me a lot more. I might talk to my grandmother about monks and that kind of stuff when I was younger. But those were the more holistic, encompassing with that sort of broader, less specific kind of stuff, more broad, to made more resonated with me a bit more, if that made sense.
What do monks do?
Um, they meditate themselves into oblivion. No, so what I think monks do, right, is we have the physical body and we have the psychological, right? And we're sort of unbound in our psychological, whereas we're quite bound by our physical. And so what I think that monks do is they sort of realize that none of any of this physical really matters as much as we sort of typically make it out to matter, especially in Western society. And so they detach themselves from the sort of the common constraints of being caught up in a physical realm. And by doing so, they're then free to explore all that's possible in sort of the infinite of possibilities in your mind. And that's what I think when they're meditating, they're exploring possibility space. And it just turns out that doing it psychologically is the easiest way so far. It's sort of the most unbound way we could do it. Like I can think things, but I can't make them yet. They're not physically possible at this point in time due to technology or whatever limitations there are physically. But psychologically, I can think about that. And so I think that's what monks are doing. They're in their minds exploring the possibility space of the universe. And like, I can understand why that would be very satisfying. I like doing it for myself. I like meditating, and I like having that time to go and explore the universe of possibilities in my mind.
So I was exposed to the Buddhism. Yeah, fuck. I shouldn't have. I think I smoked way too much, dude. Jesus Christ. But anyways,
Off could never be enough.
uh, yeah. I don't know. I don't know what to say, dude. But yeah, Buddhism when I was in Thailand, and it was interesting because I didn't know like too much about what monks did, and then I remember seeing in buses the front seat, like the best seat, was saved for monks. Like if a monk came, you would have to get out of that seat and go to the back, and the monk would take the front seat by the driver. They also had their own sitting area in airports, like nice couches, and it would only be for monks. And I would see them traveling a lot. And when I went to temples, I didn't really see them doing anything. So I was wondering, like, okay, like this is cool, but are monks like helping society? Are they actually being an impact, like a positive impact for society? Is the church? And I don't think I saw that, dude. I saw mainly, receiving food, receiving money. Like the monks would go around, take food and money, and Thai people, they give a shit ton of their money to the churches, to the Buddhist religion. Like they would feel pressure to, so much so that they would talk shit about their neighbor that wasn't giving enough. So they felt like, oh shit, it's an obligation. Like if anyone finds out I only gave like a little bit of what I made this month, then they're gonna think badly of me. And I was like, yo, so what the fuck is going on here? Like, there's so many beautiful aspects to religion, but I didn't understand the monks. Like, do they do anything else? Like, do they actually help society in any way?
Well, look, I'm sure that there's cases that they do, and I'm sure that there's cases they don't. And it isn't a black and white sort of thing. It'll be a spectrum across all of society and all of the planet, across all of time that it's happened, right? But I sort of get what you're saying in this instance, which is like they've kind of not parasitized, but they've kind of cottoned onto this thing like, hey, we can chill and do fuck all and just like think nonstop, like meditate, right? And because of this status that we've developed over time, people will just give us money and give us food, right? And so, they depend, like those people that give us the money depend on us to appease their own guilt and bullshit. And then we can use that to get away with not necessarily doing much or having to contribute much. So I can see how that, forms a sort of equilibrium where that literally the service they're providing might just be to appease people's guilt, right? So by them giving some money, it makes them feel better. It makes them feel like they're giving something to a higher power. Yeah. And then for the monk, it's solving a problem because then now they don't have to work. They don't have to do any of this sort of stuff. But I'm sure that there's definitely cases where they do fuck all. I'm sure there's cases where they do heaps. But like to me, what I would think a monk's sort of role is to be free from the physical requirements, so to speak, or the physical obligations that typically exist for people, like having to feed yourself and having to worry about where your next meal is going to come from and a roof over your head. And so if you take that worry away and you have a temple that you don't have to you're not worrying about how the temple gets maintained and all the rest of it, you're then free to explore thought space, possibility space. And I think possibly the monks are meant to be like psychonauts, like they're meant to be astronauts, but in psychological space that go off and find this meaning and this value, and then they bring it back to the people that are more constrained in physical space. So I think that historically is what the monks were meant to do, like philosophers, so to speak. Yeah. But I can understand that like they might have got away from that.
Yo, shout out to Wat Rong Kun in Thailand, the White Temple in Chiang Mai, the most beautiful Buddhist temple I've ever seen in my life. Look at this fucking thing. Maybe it'd be better if you actually look for it, but look at this fucking
Amazing.
temple, dude.
Breathtaking.
When I was there, dude, I was so blown away that I got in a motorcycle accident an hour after.
I remember.
Yeah, dude.
I remember the flow-on effects of that. That was hilarious. Oh my gosh. Full body cast. That was a good one.
Yeah, that was rough.
You just hit on a good thing though, right? So you mentioned how amazing that is. Okay. So this is another thing that people very long ago cottoned onto. But if you build these immense structures, this amazing architecture, it's awe-inspiring. It in itself is a way of helping people to believe in something greater, because it takes your breath away. It's like, it's proof that there is something greater out there, like it's just bonkers. I remember in Malaysia going to some, getting the word. What's the places of worship?
Like temple?
Islam. Yeah, but what's it?
Mosque.
Yeah, mosque. Jesus. Going to my first mosque and just being like so shocked at how immense these structures were. Like it could fit 80 to 100,000 people. And I was like, what? But can you imagine the collective power, right, that comes with getting that many people together, all vibrating or oscillating on a certain frequency because of their shared beliefs? Can you imagine how powerful that is versus the people not being together in that group, right? By bringing those people together, sharing that vibration and that oscillation, it's almost as if anything is possible, okay? But fragmented, separated people do not have that same power. They don't have that collective focus and that shared vibration. You know what I mean? Like it's just so much harder to achieve in life broken apart like that. It's this incredible sort of collaborative power.
Damn, I never even considered that. Like I was just imagining myself walking around what Muslims walk around, Mecca.
Yep.
Like being there and actually participating in that, what that would be like.
So it's just such an immense shared connection, right? Can you imagine being in the same state as 80 to 100,000 other people, right? I know you can to a certain degree because you've been to festivals and things like that, and they're examples of that same thing, right? Different ways to get a similar sort of feeling. But that's when you lose yourself in that moment, that can be a form of bliss, right? You lose all your physical worries your insecurities and all that other stuff. Everything melts away and you're fully present. It's like a flow state. But can you imagine being in a
Oh yeah.
flow state? Like I love flow state for myself, but can you imagine being in a flow state with 100,000 other people?
Imagine doing M with those 100,000 people, right? Because if you can get to like a high level at a festival doing drugs, imagine what it would be like walking around Mecca doing drugs.
Okay, so but that's what old drugs were. Old drugs were just getting together with that shared belief and that vibration. That was that experience, right? MDMA is just like a convenient way to get a similar kind of experience, but it's like junk food, yeah? Like the junk food is, you get that stimulation, but you don't get the nourishment. The MDMA is kind of similar. You get that state without any of the shared connectedness, or not as much of the shared connectedness. Whereas you could go to one of these places and literally vibe with all these other people and have that MDMA or whatever, that experience. Isn't that an interesting concept?
That is a really interesting concept. I had a cool religious experience actually when I was in Bali. Actually,
Yeah.
I met this Colombian guy at the hostel. Fuck, this is already sounding like a gay story. So we rented these motorbikes, and I'm going to use scooters because scooters just sounds more gay, just to make the story more gay than it is. And then we went to go see monkeys together. We did actually do that. Yeah.
Kind of like a date.
But anyways, we went off like the beaten path, right? We just got lost, dude. And we're going through like these, yeah, in each other, inside each other, yeah. In each other's eyes, also in each other too. Like I remember, like we pulled over and we fucked on the side of these rice farms, and like we went into the water. You know what I mean? Like they have those like
the pools.
Yeah. It was nice. Like if you ever want to fuck somebody, dude, in those rice fields, it's nice, dude. I don't know what it is, but the grass, like it just looks like grass, but like it's just so soft. The rice plants. We ended up at this is it temple or mosque? Fuck.
I think over there.
And they were having this water ceremony, and they just invited us to be a part of it. So they gave us clothes to change into. We changed in these change rooms, and then we approached this fountain, and there was like maybe like between 9 and 12 stations, maybe less, of water spouts, right? And I guess this water was coming from the mountain, so it was like blessed. And they had it in these, yeah, like I said, these 9 fountain stations, and you would have to go into the water, into the fountain, and rinse yourself off in each of the stations, and concentrate on letting all of like your bad energy out throughout every station. And at the end, supposedly you have cleansed yourself of all like negative shit, bad shit. And it just so happened they have one like every so often, but that one specifically was only once a year. And we just got lucky, and we were just at the right place at the right time. And then we sat down with them, and then there was like some other ceremony where they were praying, and we weren't allowed like in that room, but it had no walls, right? So we were just able to like just be an audience and watch them do their praying ritual. It was fucking cool, man.
Did you feel absolved of all your sins and bullshit?
Yeah, I did. I went with it, dude. I had to. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna be one of them today, and I'm gonna believe in this wholeheartedly. And I did, dude. 9 stations, washing myself. I concentrated, and I felt amazing afterwards.
Yeah. So, but that's the power of belief. Like, if you believe that that's what you're doing, it can actually work. It can be true. Yeah.
Yeah, it was dope.
Right.
Yeah.
That's also the power of placebo. It's why we have the rituals and things, because if you create this immense structure, this awe-inspiring thing around you, and everyone else is doing this stuff and they're all telling you that it's working, then it's like it's going to work for you. And so it's sort of a way of getting people out of their own way. It's a way of helping people to get rid of the trauma and the trauma that they're carrying, and a mechanism to release. And I think in modern society, because of our sort of skepticism, which I had, right, my atheistness that I grew up because I couldn't understand the teaching, we've sort of done ourselves a disservice, right? Like the pendulum swung very far to religion, and then it swung very far away from it. And I'm hoping that we can come back, but with a more holistic approach this time, right? Like a more encompassing version of religion instead of what it previously had been taught. We can take all of the positives from it and create this new sort of meta religion that really allows us to, not get caught on the fact that God's a person and heaven is this place or whatever. Like we can talk about it in more sort of what I believe to be accurate terms now because of what we know about fundamental physics and what the universe could be, or how it's currently best described, right? The most accurate models we have. That kind of, like, so I'm pro religion now, but not the typical sense. I think like in this term of shared beliefs, I think that's an incredibly powerful thing. And I think as a society, as a collective organism that is humanity on this planet, we actually really need it. Right. And I just tie it together with one thing, right? The yin and the yang. Have you ever seen that picture? The yin and the yang, the white and the black?
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So think about it in this term, right? The white is pure order. Okay. So that's like heaven. Okay. And then the black is pure chaos. And that's like hell. Life is the point where they meet. That's the thin slither that is existence, where order meets chaos, or they filter together. Okay. And that's why I think it's really important that we have this new sort of meta religion.
All right. So if you'd like to join our religion, you can subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and share this video with your friends so we can gain more followers into Idiot Squared Religion.
Yeah, we're definitely not going to have that name for the religion, but I think we're going to have to brainstorm a new one.
Yeah.
Like the funniest thing is, as a name, I really like a new religion.
Yeah, it's a cool name brand name too, New Religion.
But I think there's a lot we can learn and we can take from about it, and to really, and like to say like, hey, we're not trying to say that we've spoken to God or anything. Like none of that's part of this religion. Like we're saying like, we can take all this value from what's previously been done, and we can sort of, know with a good degree of certainty, right, or the higher probability that this is, a good interpretation or good way to interpret this and to instantiate it in life. But yeah, we'll have the doc attached. You can read about it. If you got any questions or you think we're crazy, just fucking comment, post, roast us, let us know, We're just two dudes talking shit, really. We don't really know much.
Yeah, 100%. Especially me. I would be both of us. Or it's going to be funny when, you know what? Guys, comment, who is the bigger idiot? We should get like a poll going. Who is the bigger idiot? Obviously, I would win that, but it would just be fun to do it anyways.
What do you mean, obviously? We're going to have to make this a competition now.
Yeah, who is the bigger idiot? Who is the bigger idiot? Yeah, that's true. I like it.
Me too. So we'll call that a wrap?
Yeah.
All right. So yeah, I'll share the doc. It'll be in the description. If you got any questions or you want to have discussions about religion, or you think what we said was complete bullshit, or if it resonated with you, let us know. Share this with your friends if it triggers them. Share this with your friends if it doesn't trigger them.
All right. I'll see you next week, bro.
Peace.
All right. Peace.